I didn't want to believe it. I didn't set out to uncover a conspiracy. I was digging through old CIA documents for something else entirely, a school project of all things, when I stumbled onto a phrase that stopped me cold: behavioral modification via chemical means. At first, I thought I was reading Cold War science fiction. Then I saw the name MK Ultra. It sounded like a bad B movie or a forgotten 80s synth band. But as I kept digging, I realized this wasn't fiction. It was a real CIA program. One that ran for over 20 years. One that involved drugging, torturing, and manipulating people, most of whom had no idea they were part of it. The deeper I went, the more disturbing it became. This is the story of MK Ultra. Not a theory, not a myth. But the government tried to erase a very real chapter in American history, and nearly succeeded. This is the story they tried to erase. Project MK Ultra, Sub-Project 29. The purpose of this project is to provide funds to carry out the isolation and characterization of the intoxicating substances present in certain varieties of Revea corymbosa. The mind is a battlefield. The year's 1950. The Cold War is heating up, and America is terrified. Rumors start circulating that the Soviet Union has developed techniques for mind control, ways to extract secrets, alter beliefs, even turn prisoners of war against their own country. The fear? The communists could brainwash anyone. Enter the CIA. Under Director Alan Dulles, the agency launched MK Ultra, a top-secret program designed to explore the limits of the human mind. But this wasn't some academic study. This was a full-blown covert operation. There were no ethics board, no accountability, and just one mission: discover how to control the brain. Who was Alan Dulles? Before leading the CIA, Alan Dulles was a spy in the Office of Strategic Services. Stationed in Switzerland during World War II, Dulles gathered deep intel from those leading the anti-Nazi resistance. He was even linked to the Valkyrie plot to kill Hitler. Dulles believed that whoever controlled the mind would prevent the future. And he wasn't alone. The US military had already brought over former Nazi scientists through something called Project Paperclip. These weren't just engineers. Some had conducted human experiments during the Holocaust. Now they were helping the CIA. They studied hypnosis, electroshock, sensory deprivation, drugs, and above all, LSD. LSD was new, mysterious, and powerful. The CIA saw it as a possible truth serum, or a mind eraser, or a weapon. They didn't fully understand what it did to people, but they were willing to find out, even if it meant hurting people to do it. America's human lab rats. They gave LSD to mental patients without warning. MK Ultra didn't just happen in secret labs. It happened in hospitals, universities, prisons, even in people's homes. And most of the subjects had no idea. They were being experimented on. The CIA funded dozens of sub-projects across the country, some through front organizations. Others do so through grants disguised as academic research. But the goal was always the same: test the limits of psychological manipulation. MK Ultra's mind control experiments generally centered around behavior modification via electroshock therapy, hypnosis, polygraphs, radiation, and a variety of drugs, toxins, and chemicals. These experiments relied on a range of test subjects, some who freely volunteered, some who volunteered under coercion, and some who had absolutely no idea they were involved in a sweeping defense research program. They gave LSD to mental patients without warning. They spiked the drinks of unwitting soldiers. They paid drug addicts to participate in experiments they couldn't possibly understand.
I was given a glass of Kool-Aid, and so were the other children. This Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
One man, Harold Blower, was a professional tennis player receiving treatment for depression. He was given a massive dose of a mescaline derivative without his knowledge. He died within hours. His family didn't find out the truth until decades later. In Montreal, Dr. Ewan Cameron, a psychiatrist working with CIA funding, used a method he called psychic driving. It involved drugging patients into a coma for weeks, playing loops of recorded messages into their ears, and giving them massive electroshock sessions. These patients weren't spies or soldiers. Many were just everyday people suffering from anxiety or postpartum depression. And the worst part? None gave informed consent because no one told them what was happening. Operation Midnight Climax.
We learned a lot about human nature in the bedroom. To the mystical rites of a magical mushroom ceremony performed by an Indian shaman. To a Spanish bull rape. The bull has had electrodes implanted in the brain and is controlled by a scientist.
If this story isn't weird enough, let me introduce you to Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA, always creative in its cruelty, decided to set up fake brothels in San Francisco and New York City. They hired sex workers to lure men to these apartments. Once inside, the men were dosed with LSD, again without their knowledge, and watched through two-way mirrors. Yes, really. CIA agents sat behind those mirrors, taking notes while sipping cocktails. They wanted to see if people could be manipulated into spilling secrets during sex, or if drugs could make them more pliable. The safe houses had microphones hidden in electrical outlets. The beds had restraints. Some sessions were recorded. Others ended with the men stumbling into the streets, confused and tripping. Prostitutes were given $100 for each man they lured to the bordello, who were then unknowingly dosed with LSD in the cocktails they were likely pleasantly surprised to receive. With guidance from the agents, the women experimented with different lines of questioning at different points during the evening, working to determine when the men might be most susceptible to mind control. It has a tremendous effect on the guy. It's a boost to his ego if she's telling him he was really neat and she wants to stay for a few more hours, a CIA staffer later explained.
I need a guarantee. I do this thing for the company, and I get my commission back.
Guarantee, baby. The CIA is the way.
Never thought I'd be a spook.
Look, this ain't just any liquid, man.
Operation Midnight Climax was not scientific at all, Kinzer says. The guys weren't scientists. They weren't sex therapists or psychologists. They were sitting on a portable toilet drinking cocktails out of a pitcher. One of the agents involved, George White, once wrote, "I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic. But I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun." That's what he called it. Fun. Collateral damage.
I'm told that your father has had an accident. But that was the cover story told by the CIA.
Frank Olson fell or was pushed from a hotel window. By the early 1950s, the experiments were escalating. One of the most infamous cases was that of Frank Olson, a biochemist working for the Army. He was dosed with LSD by his CIA colleagues without warning. 9 days later, he fell or was pushed from a hotel window in New York. Did the CIA's Dr. Frank Olson jump to his death, or was he pushed? Olson's death remains officially classified as undetermined. But all the evidence points toward murder, and none of it points away. The official story was suicide, but decades later, evidence suggested otherwise. His family launched an investigation. They exhumed his body. Forensic experts found injuries consistent with a beating, not a fall. The government eventually admitted to the LSD dosing. They offered the Olson family a settlement, but the bigger truth remained buried. Frank Olson wasn't the only one. Many others, people with names, families, and lives, suffered. Some lost their sanity. Some lost years of memory. Some just disappeared. And the CIA, for decades, they said nothing. The truth comes out. In 1973, as the Watergate scandal rocked Washington, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK Ultra files destroyed. But a few boxes survived. 2 years later, among a group of journalists and a congressional committee, the church committee started asking questions. What they found shocked the nation. Senators listened in disbelief as victims testified, as files revealed the scope of the program, as names like Sidney Gottlieb, MK Ultra's chief chemist, surfaced for the first time. It turned out that the CIA had violated every ethical code imaginable. But no one was prosecuted or sent to prison. Most of the victims never got justice. Many never got an apology. MK Ultra was real, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Echoes of MK Ultra. People like to think MK Ultra is ancient history, a bizarre Cold War footnote. But the truth is, its shadow still looms over us. The program inspired movies, TV shows, and conspiracy theories. Stranger Things, The Manchurian Candidate, and Jason Bourne owe something to MK Ultra. But it's not just fiction. Today, we face new forms of manipulation. Behavioral science is used in advertising, politics, and tech. Algorithms nudge us to act. Data is harvested to predict our moves. Consent is buried in terms and conditions. We're not being drugged in motel rooms anymore, but we're still being watched, influenced, controlled. The methods are subtler. The ethics? Still blurry. What else is hidden in some forgotten file cabinet? In a redacted memo? In the silence of a victim who was never believed? This was MK Ultra, and we were never supposed to know it existed. What else don't we know? I used to think stories like this couldn't be true, that our government wouldn't do something so monstrous. But MK Ultra happened. It's not a rumor, it's not a conspiracy, it's history. They experimented on innocent people. They covered it up, and they almost got away with it. So now I ask, what else have they done that we haven't discovered yet?